one. Welcome to Dodgers Dogs. As part of the Dodgers Daily Network, Casey Porter here, joined by Austin Brubaker on a day where we don't have a whole lot to talk about. Right, Austin?
Oh, no, there's absolutely nothing to talk about.
So dive in. I mean, okay, so first of all, I lied. Let me dive in just for a second.
Yeah.
I got to say this. I hope I don't get emotional because Austin Barnes was the first player I ever got to talk to in Oklahoma City. We talked for probably 10, 15 minutes about JT Realmuto, who I coached against, who went to school in the Oklahoma City area at a Middale school called Carl Albert. And him and JT got drafted together with the Marlins. They played together. They were good buds. Austin asked all sorts of questions like, okay, now where is JT from? How far is it from here? So we had just a great conversation. Of course, to me, it seemed like 15 minutes. To him, it probably seemed like 2 minutes or whatever, vice versa, whatever. And so then Austin Barnes gets called back down a couple of years ago, and he actually remembered me. And so Austin Barnes is literally my favorite player in the system. Has been since 2019. So this is in a lot. So, and I'll say this, okay? This is a celebration of Austin Barnes. Austin Barnes has had a hell of a career. I will never forget the fact that Will Smith, point blank, was struggling with the pitchers in 2020. Austin Barnes saved the Dodgers' ass, and he caught the last pitch of the 2020 World Championship. Austin Barnes has been a stud off the field. Austin Barnes has been a great backup catcher. He's been a guy that's been a great receiver, and he's my favorite player. Having said that, I'm so proud of the Dodgers. We talk about this all the time. This is a meritocracy. Austin Barnes can't throw anybody out. The game is moving to stolen bases. I put a video out there the other day. Dalton Rushing is sub 2.0. Point blank, if Austin Barnes could just get around 2.0 in his pop time, he'd still be a Dodger. So the Dodgers made this decision, this tough decision, based on the merit system and not the country club system. And I've never been more proud of this organization, although it really hurts to see Austin Barnes go.
Yeah, you have to start off with when there is a move like this, which this is a big move for the Los Angeles Dodgers, a move that they do not take lightly at all. When they make some type of move for somebody who has been so impactful for the organization, like a player like an Austin Barnes has, which, yes, he has been incredibly impactful to the organization. You mentioned 2020, which is a remarkable achievement for what he was able to do and what he meant. He was a main reason why they were able to win the World Series championship that year with what he was able to do and step up during those moments. He also, throughout the course of his Dodgers tenure, you mentioned the human element, but on the baseball field also meant a lot for this organization. And what was rightly on this team since 2015 was a part of this organization for a long time. And oftentimes when we see these types of decisions, we forget about the human element. And I want to make sure that we don't forget about that, because Austin Barnes has meant a ton. He has been a leader within this clubhouse. He has been a leader within the organization. He has helped out tremendously, adapting a lot of the pitchers that you have seen come up to the big leagues, had some success. Austin Barnes has been a big part of the reason for that. He has been obviously somebody who has helped the other pitchers as well on the pitching staff. He has meant a ton to this organization, and as a human feeling for another human, for this decision to take place, you got to feel a little bit bad for Austin Barnes and what this ultimately led. As you had mentioned, the game started to move away from Austin Barnes with certain elements of his game. Yes, he struggled offensively during the later portion of his tenure during the Dodgers, but I think you mentioned it correctly. I think it is some of the other aspects of his game that just with the way that the game of baseball is moving, a little bit more of a speed-oriented game, focusing a lot more on stolen bases, I think ultimately it was going to come to some sort of point to where the Dodgers had to make a decision. And with this decision brings a new opportunity, which, as you had mentioned, this is and should be in the game of baseball a merit-based system, which with the structure of Major League Baseball, with free agent contracts, and especially with getting Austin Barnes to that club option that they have, wasn't a decision that I don't think we really expected necessarily quite yet. But ultimately, the Dodgers decided to make the move, and Dalton Rushing is a Major League Baseball player. So you can have sadness for Austin Barnes on a human level, but also have a ton of excitement because Dalton Rushing is an extraordinary baseball player, and I couldn't be more excited to see him put on a Los Angeles Dodgers uniform.
Yeah, if you haven't had a chance to check out the hot take, we got Dalton Rushing talking. We've got some different points of his game that just all around tried to hit on every point of his game that makes him really good. So definitely a celebration of Austin Barnes. This is, I think too, also, I've got some tinfoil, so sit down for a minute, but I think he's going to get picked up. I think there's plenty of club. What is his salary, Austin? Do you know?
It was $3-ish million, $3.5 million, something like that is what his club option was.
So I do think he'll get picked up, and I think that he will get past his pension, and I think the Dodgers knew that. So as far as him not getting to his pension, I don't think there's any jeopardy of that. So as far as Chris Taylor, how much is Chris Taylor making a year? Chris
Taylor is making 15-ish millions of dollars
That's a lot
year.
Different. So there's a whole different scenario. If you DFA Chris Taylor, who in the hell is going to pick up that contract? Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
That somebody will pick up probably now it's $2 million for Austin Barnes. Somebody's going to pick up Austin Barnes for $2 million for the rest of this year. I mean, I couldn't imagine that not happening. That's pretty cheap for what you're getting. A guy who caught the last out of the World Series. You're getting a guy who's been the personal catcher of Will Smith. You're getting a guy that is going to mentor your young catchers and all your young pitchers. You're getting a guy that will do anything and everything that will be asked for $2 million. Yeah. So I think the Dodgers were very confident that if they made this move, somebody will pick up Austin Barnes and he will get to his pension. I think Chris Taylor's a whole different scenario because his salary is so high. I think if the Dodgers released somebody like him, I think they'd be doing it having no clue, probably with the idea that nobody is going to pick him up. And because of that decision, he's not going to get to his pension. So is that a little bit too tinfoil for you?
Yeah, no. So this becomes a little bit of complicated. So this is something that we've talked about quite a bit here on Dodgers Dawgs, especially when it comes in relation to Chris Taylor, because Chris Taylor has a little bit over 9 years of service time. Once you hit that 10 years, you get pensioned by Major League Baseball. And the Dodgers are very intentional about taking care of their players, which led to a lot of thought. Okay, what are they going to do for a player like Austin Barnes? So entering this season, he entered the season with about 8.5 years of service time, which means that in order to reach that 10 years, Austin Barnes would have to be on a major league roster for the entirety of this season and then about half of next season to reach that 10 years. And that became very complicated for the Dodgers to be able to make that work for Austin Barnes, which is a player that has meant a lot to this organization, and they desperately want to do what they can to take care of players, but they can't take care of players to the detriment of the organization.
To the detriment of the merit system. You can't do it.
Yeah, you can't do that. And when we're talking about Dalton Rushing and his development, you look at the numbers that Dalton Rushing is able to consistently put up and the progress that he has made specifically behind the plate, it was going to get to a point to where you have to have Dalton Rushing on the major league roster. So the question for the Dodgers is if they wanted to get Dalton Rushing onto the major league roster, and if they wanted to have Austin Barnes be part of the situation, they would be carrying 3 catchers, in which case they would have to add some sort of positional versatility, which if you talk about the value of Dalton Rushing, the value of Dalton Rushing is not just what he's able to contribute with his bat, but the fiery nature and his ability behind the plate has immense value. So you'd either be delaying the process with Dalton Rushing by having them continue to have more time, lots of time down at the minor leagues, or you go ahead and make this move, knowing that it was going to be incredibly difficult for you as an organization to be able to get Austin Barnes anywhere close to his 10 years.
Yes,
and you hope that another organization sees the value of what Austin Barnes was able to bring, which there's a lot of value of what he was able to bring in the clubhouse, which they're certainly going to miss a lot of aspects of that, of what he was able to do and the knowledge that he and the relationship that he was able to build up with the pitching staff. Dalton Rushing, though, as I'm sure Casey and I will talk about quite a bit, we have immense confidence in his ability to be able to adapt to this pitching staff, which he has started to get to know with the years that he spent in the organization. We have immense confidence in his ability behind the plate to do the job, to be able to throw out runners at a more effective rate, which if you look at his numbers down at the minor leagues, have been relatively solid with being able to throw runners out.
Well, he popped a 1.8 the other day. I posted it.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah, you look at a lot of those numbers, and then offensively as well, based on the history that Dalton Rushing has at the minor leagues, which doesn't mean that's going to necessarily translate every single time to the major league level, but does show you the quality of hitter that Dalton Rushing has. I'm about as confident in Dalton Rushing as a hitter as I am with just about any prospect within the organization as on the hitting side. So I'm really excited to see what Dalton Rushing is able to do. And I think that's ultimately why the Dodgers at some point we're going to have to make this decision.
Yep.
They decided on now to be able to do it. And I think that's ultimately why. Chris Taylor, as you had mentioned, a little bit of a different situation as far as taking care of him. There's also more positions he can kind of fill in. And
Alex Freeland can't play the outfield. That's a problem.
That's exactly right. And there's other concerns that I have necessarily about in Alex Freeland right now that I think he needs to just tune up just a little bit before a player like him is ready. So I think with Dalton Rushing, there was very little that he had to prove down at the minor leagues, in which case, how long do you want to delay this process of getting him up to the big league? So then the question that ultimately the Dodgers are going to have to try to figure out is how do we adapt Dalton Rushing and make sure that he comes up, that he's going to be able to provide value, but get him on the playing field as well is always going to be the challenge for the Dodgers with Dalton Rushing.
Yeah, so how about this? You're watching Dalton Rushing here. This is a good point by Justin Lamas. Believes that Austin Barnes will get released. LA will be on the hook for the rest of his contract, and then somebody will sign Barnes as a free agent on a prorated league minimum. Either way, Austin Barnes is getting signed with a major league club, and he's getting paid what he has on his contract. But what do you think about that idea?
It's totally possible that another organization wants to do it for the league minimum, and then it becomes a game of, and I don't know the rest of the teams in the league as far as their need for a backup catcher at this point, or what exactly their backup catcher situation. If there is a need and that becomes available and you don't want anybody else to take a player like that, then you go ahead and take him and then just pay the salary that's remaining on the rest of his contract, which is not a lot for a backup catcher or not a lot for a player in general. But you could see, as Justin Lamas pointed out, some teams waiting to see if they can go ahead and sign him for the prorated league minimum salary. That could be another case that takes hold.
Okay, so let me put my tinfoil hat on here, Austin. Let me see what you think. This is Clayton Kershaw that you're looking at here. That is Dalton Rushing catching Clayton Kershaw for the first time ever. Like, not even in spring training, not in bullpens, not in any kind of sim game, nothing. First time that Clayton Kershaw ever threw to Dalton Rushing. I do think there's a chance that the club at least went up to Clayton and went, what do you think about the kid? And Clayton was like, man, he's good. Because I'll tell you, the reason why I say that is I know in 2019, I asked Clayton Kershaw this in the post-game interview. You can go back and listen to the first one. When Will Smith was in Dalton Rushing's position in 2019, one of the top prospects in the organization, a big-time catcher, Clayton Kershaw came down for a rehab just like he did with Dalton Rushing. And about a week later, guess who got called to the major leagues? Will freaking Smith. And Clayton Kershaw was on record saying, man, this Will Smith kid's going to be freaking good. So I could easily see Clayton Kershaw seeing the writing on the wall here and giving the assurance that Dalton Rushing actually is a good catcher. Now, I know that Austin Barnes is Kershaw's personal catcher and this and that and all that. But if the writing was on the wall, I think Clayton Kershaw would be totally honest about that, like he was with Will Smith. And then here's my other tinfoil philosophy here. And I don't even think it's tinfoil because the Dodgers they leave no stone unturned. Guess who's hitting the ball right now better the last couple games?
Who's that?
Michael Conforto. Okay. So if the Dodgers would have brought up Dalton Rushing this time last week, that would have been a shitstorm. Okay. Because Dodgers fans would have been like, oh, we're going to DFA Michael Conforto. Dalton Rushing is the starting left fielder, and Michael Conforto's out on his ass and blah. I mean, it would have been such a swirl that it wouldn't have been fair to the Dodgers. It wouldn't have been fair to Michael Conforto, and it wouldn't have been fair to Dalton Rushing. So I'll be darned, Michael Conforto starts looking a lot better at the plate, looking like the left fielder we thought he was going to be. And so you bring Dalton Rushing up the second that Michael Conforto starts hitting. So there's not that swirl that Dalton Rushing is immediately becoming the left fielder for the LA Dodgers.
No, and I think this is something that is really important to point out, just as far as the limitations for Dalton Rushing when it comes to the outfield. So in the career of Dalton Rushing and in his minor league tenure, he did not play any outfield until he got to Oklahoma City last year, which was August time period, late July. So I think it was right after the trade deadline. He did not get a whole lot of experience. So he got maybe a month or so of games in the outfield at the end of 2024, with the knowledge that Will Smith is locked up now for the next 9 years, 10 years. He's going to be one of the catchers for a long period of time. This year, Dalton Rushing has only started one game in the outfield, which is not a lot of time of experience to be able to get a lot of playing time out there. So when we're talking about Dalton Rushing, I don't think, and I think this is something that I read, I was out for a lot of bit, so I haven't been able to catch up with a lot of stuff. I don't believe, at least initially, they're going to be playing Dalton Rushing a whole lot in left field, because I don't think he's had a whole lot of experience in left field.
Well, put it this way, that's not why they're calling him up.
Yes, that's
whether he ends up
right.
playing there or not, that's not why they're calling him up today.
That's exactly right.
I can confidently say that.
Yes, that is exactly right. They're not calling him up because he can play left field. They're going to give Michael Conforto, especially because now that he's hitting a little bit more recently, they were always going to give him probably 3 months to be able to figure things out, a good solid chunk of time. And they're going to continue to be patient with that. Dalton Rushing isn't going to get a lot of those playing time because honestly, and this is something we talked about during the offseason a little bit, an outfield defense of Rushing in left, Pages in center, and Teoscar Hernandez in right field, if you wanted to turn into that, is not a great outfield defense, especially if you have Dalton Rushing, who hasn't played a lot of experience in the outfield a whole lot. So his role, I think, is going to be something where it's going to be similar-ish to Austin Barnes, but maybe perhaps a little bit more playing time. We'll have to see how the Dodgers are able to make that work, but I don't think the expectation should be he's going to be playing a lot of outfield, because I actually don't know how much outfield, if any at all, he's going to be playing a lot based on his experience in the minor leagues, especially with how they've utilized him this year. I think it's intentional that they want to bring him up and continue his development at the catcher, because I think Dalton Rushing is best when he's close to the baseball, best when he's behind the plate, which I know is something you talk about quite a bit.
Absolutely. 100%. Now, I'm not saying he won't play left field. I'm just saying that's not why he's getting brought up.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, okay, how do we get him 15 at-bats a week? How do we get him 3 to 4 games a week? Well, you catch him twice a week. I think we can expect squarely for Dalton Rushing to catch a minimum of 2 games a week.
Yes.
So there's what, 7 at-bats probably? 6 to 7 at-bats? Mm-hmm. So you need to double that. So then maybe he plays a game at first base that Freddie Freeman sits out a day game after a night game, or you have a really long night game or whatever it may be. And then maybe he does play 1 game in left field. Mm-hmm. So you get him in left field by being creative, trying to get him his 15, 16 at-bats a week. but not because you're trying to make him the everyday left fielder. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's a really good point because you talk about Will Smith and Freddie Freeman. There are a little bit of separate conversations. With Will Smith, we've seen him come out to really fast starts in the season, but it was really slowed down as the season and as progresses. Dalton Rushing is going to be a huge impact because instead of starting Austin Barnes once a week like they've done in seasons past, or once to twice a week, which is not a whole lot, and you're not really having a whole lot of expectations with that, you can kind of look at Will Smith and how he's doing and keep him as fresh as you possibly can. With Freddie Freeman, who is still very much dealing with all of the stuff with his ankle right now, Dalton Rushing has a lot of experience at first base, not just at the minor league level, but dating back to his college days. He's very good at first base. And then to try to be creative, to try to find different ways to be able to get him more experience, more at-bats, which is something that is going to be important if you want to see Dalton Rushing properly adapt to the major league level, is you have to give him try to find some sort of way to get him some regular at-bats, in which case they might throw him into left field occasionally. I just don't see that as the main expectation for Dalton Rushing, because I don't think that's a fair expectation to throw him out there left field on a consistent basis.
Okay, so what is Will Smith hitting? Do you have Will Smith's numbers?
I can pull those up real quick.
Let me explain something, okay?
Yeah.
Will Smith, the other night, he hit a pop time of 1.5. 1.5. Keep in mind, the average pop time for a catcher in the major league level is a little bit over 2. Now, that's a little bit skewed because the Dodgers do it a little bit differently. They have their infielders get in front of the bag. They have their infielders catch the ball in front of their body. So if they did it the way that we used to do it, where you would straddle the bag, let the ball carry to the back of the bag because the ball travels faster than the glove, and then just drop the glove, then you're not going to get anywhere as close to a 1.5 or whatever. But the way the Dodgers do it, he popped a 1.5, and he's hitting what?
He on the season, he is currently, his numbers are 330, 429, 486, so 160 WRC plus.
So you got a catcher that's popping 1.5, that's hitting 330. He ain't moving. Okay, this move is not for. Okay, well, now all of a sudden Will Smith's going to move to third base and replace Max Muncy. That's not what this is, okay? No. This can be defined as easily as if to say, now give me Will Smith's numbers in the second half of last season and give me Will Smith's numbers in the second half of 2023. Can you look those up right quick, Austin?
I can look those up in just a second.
What we're efforting right now are the second half numbers of 2023 and the second half numbers of 2024 for Will Smith. One of the best offensive and defensive catchers as far as throwing the ball down in Major League Baseball. I will be I honestly don't know these numbers. I'm just shooting this in the dark, but I do have a theory here. So are you there yet?
I'm just pulling it up right now. Yeah. So 2024, the second half numbers that he had, so in the first half, and I'm going to give you batting average and I'll give you WRC plus. So the first half in 2024, he hit 272. Second half hit 206.
Okay.
So WRC plus for those numbers are 130 versus 78 in 2024.
Yeah. So Dalton Rushing is not getting brought up to LA to replace Will Smith. Dalton Rushing is getting brought up to LA to give Will Smith a chance to be the same second half player as he is first half player. Yeah. That's why Dalton Rushing's getting brought up, because I love AB. I don't mean this to throw shade. I don't mean this to be negative. I want to throw up in my mouth when I say this. Austin Barnes has not been a good enough player to give Will Smith enough time off to be the same second half player as he's been first half player. The Dodgers had to fix that. Dalton Rushing is. And so now Dalton Rushing can get enough at bats and enough catch twice a week, however many times he needs to where Will Smith can be the same offensive player in August and September as he is at the beginning of the year. Yeah, that's why Dalton Rushing is getting brought up.
Yeah, and this is not just a 2024 thing. 2023, exact same thing as well. Hit 279 in the first half, 242. WRC plus of 144 in the first half, 91 in the second half. Very big difference, first and second half for Will Smith. I think it is really important to be able to, for the guys that are on your offense, still find a way, especially as they're getting a little bit older. And we talked about this quite a bit. Entering the season, the Dodgers only had one player that was under the age of 30. Which means you have a lot of aging players. And those aging players, to no fault of their own, starts to wear down as they get further and further in their careers. And one of the ways to be able to combat that is to be able to find ways to get them more rest. And getting a player like a Will Smith, or getting a player like a Freddie Freeman, who the only reason why you would give Freddie Freeman more rest is because of the injuries that he has been dealing with and that he fights through in order to get on the field. The only way that you feel confident enough to be able to do that is to replace them with a player that you feel confident enough in that they can go ahead and put up some pretty solid numbers, and that you feel absolutely no concern defensive-wise as well. Dalton Rushing fits both of those boxes, both of the boxes of being able to make sure that Will Smith gets enough rest to be able to go ahead and be as good of a player as he possibly can be without taking 130 of the 162 games of the season behind the plate, which is not something that is good for him, or 120 out of the 162. And then with Freddie Freeman, also making sure that he's not putting himself in a situation to where he's not going to be ready for October, because that is the thing that's most important for him. So now you have a player that you feel extra confident with both. And Dalton Rushing, who is he's an amazing baseball player. And once he gets adapted, if it takes any time at all, which it very well, with the playing time that he's going to get, could take him some time to be able to adapt. And so you have to be patient with this process. But once he gets adapted, there is few people that are as competitive, as fiery, and wants to win as much as Dalton Rushing. And he, like I've seen in the past, steps up during those big time moments.
That's why you liked Andy Pages.
It very much. You talk about, and this relates down to what I've seen at the Great Lakes level. Andy Pages, I showed before he debuted, one of the big moments within the Loons history, and they were in a playoff chase. Dalton Rushing was the guy during the Midwest League Championship who, in a 3-game series, had a 2-home-run game and then hit another home run as well, and went absolutely unbelievable during that series, during the big moments when his team needed it the most. He is hyper competitive, as you've seen in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. And I think he's going to be another one of those breaths, the fresh air, being able to breathe life into this lineup. Another one of these young guys who's fiery, who's competitive, who hasn't won at the big league level and desperately wants to win. And I think that's something that you need to add to your lineup, to your club, in order to have that motivation to go and be back-to-back champions. It's very, very difficult to go back-to-back, but to have fiery, competitive people who haven't been there yet added to the mix, I think that's a really good recipe.
This one's way out there in the weeds, but did you see Wilson last night for the A's? Get the 4 hits.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Young dude, fun. And the Dodgers are like, man, I want that, right? I mean, that's fun.
Yeah.
They saw the breath of fresh air that kid was.
Yeah.
So that plays all into it too. But, I mean, they had that decision. But Justin Lamas is absolutely on this. We're going to get to our super chat here in a minute. If Dalton Rushing was getting brought up to be anything other than a catcher, then what would have happened is Austin Barnes would still be on the roster and James Outman would be in Oklahoma City. I mean, to me, that's a pretty simple equation. I think Justin is 100% correct on that. And then 300 GJW says, I think I really want to give Will Smith a lot of rest early in the season. I expect Dalton to catch 3 out of 7 games. Wow.
It's going to be fascinating. That's a lot. It is a lot, and I don't know what the expectation is. I think the majority of our expectations, assuming that there's 6 games within a week with the rest day, is that Dalton Rushing would probably catch 2 of those days. When they have a full week in which they have, potentially you could see Dalton Rushing catching 3 of those and Will Smith catching 4. I think that wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split between Will Smith and Dalton Rushing, because you still have an all-star caliber catcher in Will Smith that you don't want to necessarily take away all of his playing time, no matter how good Dalton Rushing is, which Dalton Rushing is very talented and very good. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a 65-35 maybe between Will Smith and Dalton Rushing, maybe leaning a little bit more towards 60-40. We'll have to see how they play it, but they have a really good option. If Will Smith needs more rest, you've got a good option now that you can feel confident in and being there defensively and offensively.
Totally agree. And Dalton knows his role. If you just go back to our interview, just go back to the hot take I took today. Dalton said it himself. I'm going to catch a couple times a week. I might put myself in left field. I've played first base. He said it. He knows his role. So, one of the questions I asked Robleski was, when you go up to the major leagues and if I don't pitch well, I'm going back to Oklahoma City, do you feel that pressure? And you could see his initial instinct was, well, hell yeah, you feel that pressure. And then he was like, oh, I'm a pro. Hold on. Let me explain this like a pro should. You could kind of see that. You know what I'm talking about? You can see that process in action. But his first reaction was like, hell yeah, you feel that. So that's a real pressure. Like James Outman goes up and he looks terrible and he's pressing and because he feels like if I do this, then I'm a failure and I'm going back down to AAA Oklahoma City because of it at the major league level. That's not a failure as a human being or a player, but at the major league level. That's a pressure you can't take away from somebody. Either they can deal with it and they can function and they can figure it out like the guys who end up being starters do, or they can't. Same with the pitchers. Ben Kasperi has figured it out. Jack Dreyer figured it out. Bobby Miller has not figured it out. So it's individual to individual. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing like I always do. I'm telling a short story and making it long to say Dalton Rushing knows exactly what his role is. He is never going to walk to the plate thinking, God dang, if I don't go 3 for 3 tonight, I'm getting my ass sent back to Oklahoma City. He's never even going to have that thought go through his mind. He knows why he's in L.A. He knows exactly what his role is, and he knows all he's got to do is go be Dalton Rushing. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I think you're going to see a relaxed Dalton Rushing as if he was an everyday player, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially with the way that the catching situation's out. It's not something where Austin Barnes is going to be sent down to Oklahoma City because they had to designate him for assignment, and because he is under a major league contract, it's not an optionable type of player, which opens up the avenue for Dalton Rushing. Once they made this move, it is a commitment by the organization to say, we are all in for Dalton Rushing. Whenever they were going to add Dalton Rushing to the 40-man roster, that was going to be of some sort of significant commitment to Dalton Rushing, because that is not something that they had to do until the offseason if they wanted to wait that long. He knows his role. He knows what exactly he has to do, or the things that he needs to fill in, and that is to be Will Smith's backup catcher, to fill in exactly when he can. And I think, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit before, when the Dodgers have come and adapted other younger players to the major league roster, it was much more of a question mark of what their role is. Or a question mark of even where exactly they're going to play.
How long are you going to be here? What's my role? That kind of thing. There were way bigger question marks than what Dalton Rushing is going to have.
And I think that would have been a very similar situation if the Dodgers decided, Dalton Rushing, you're our everyday left fielder.
I agree.
Because that is a position in which he had not necessarily played, in which case you're starting to go into more of the direction of some of the mistakes that the Dodgers have made with adapting some of the other younger players, that they tried to fit them in a position of which they didn't have a ton of experience and didn't really necessarily know their exact role, but threw them out there. And then if they don't hit during the limited playing times, well, we're just going to option you down. Dalton Rushing knows exactly what his role is, and it is a role of which he is comfortable in. And I think this is exactly the type of situation that the Dodgers need to do in order to properly adapt their younger players to the major league roster, which is something that the Dodgers desperately need to do at some point is adapt these younger players to the roster, a roster that is aging, in order to be able to incorporate that, in order to be able to grow as an organization. These are the steps that they have to take. And I think I think they're doing an appropriate job with Dalton Rushing 100%. Right now, setting 100%. Him up with the expectations and allowing him to feel comfortable leading into his big league debut.
Great point on the left field part of it. I didn't even think about it as far as if being the catcher deal, he knows exactly what his role is, 2 days a week, whatever. So he can relax, already knows. But if you do make him the everyday outfielder, then it's like, okay, well, we have to have a really good left fielder. So you've got about 20 games here. And if you're not good in 20 games, your ass is going back to Oklahoma City. That's a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
And like you said, great points here, Austin. You're absolutely on it. Is that I think the Dodgers have learned that trying to incorporate young players, as good as they might be, at the major league level is already hard enough. And then whenever you mess with it by then also making them have to adjust to an entirely new position. And I don't mean like a new position like Andy Pages is going from one outfield position to another outfield position. Or Gavin Lux is going from one infield position to another infield position, which is closer to first base. I mean, you're going from freaking catcher to the outfield where you've never played before, ever. I mean, and by the way, young man, you're the number one prospect in our organization. And by the way, young man, you're going to be the most scrutinized player that we have on the major league team. So if you go 0 for 10, fans, I mean, that's the way competitive fans do. I don't mean that in a bad way. And by the way, you're going to be playing, you're going to go from catcher. So, I mean, like shortstop to second, okay, you're still an infielder. Right field, as much as I bitched about Pages being in center, right field to center field, okay, most of the fly balls are still just fly balls, right? But catcher to left field is a massive, massive change. And so I think they learned their lesson, and they're like, you know what, we've tried to do this even on smaller increments from infield position one to the other, alpha position one to the other. We ain't doing it with this guy. He's too good. I think they learned their lesson there.
He is too good. And the last thing that you want to do is put yourself in a situation which could have been avoidable, that lessens the confidence of a young player when they're coming up to the big leagues, and puts them in a situation where they're already uncomfortable in a new environment, already uncomfortable trying to get things to work, and just adding another element in there. It's just sometimes a little bit too many things to juggle at the exact same time. This doesn't mean that Dalton Rushing is never going to play in the outfield. They're very likely in order to get him, because
but that's not what he's going to be evaluated on.
That is not what he's going to be evaluated on.
Correct.
It is something where they're still going to have to get him his plate appearances. They're still going to have to make sure, because in order to adapt to the big league level, part of the development process comes through consistent pitching and consistently going out there and getting regular at bats. And they're going to have to be a little bit creative on that. But that's not going to be his primary role, and that's not going to be the primary thing of which he's going to be, as you had mentioned, evaluated on. And ultimately, his fate won't be determined exactly by that point. And I think this is going to put him in a position to where he's going to work really well with the pitchers. They're going to learn to really love and adapt to Dalton Rushing. And then you have an absolute weapon, even when he's not playing. Man, you have an absolute weapon that when he has an off day, come off the bench, which is something that the Dodgers don't really have right now, is guys, at least leading up into this, guys that could come off of your bench and you could feel confident in going out there and putting up a competitive at bat, in which case there's a good chance that he could get some extra base power with that. Yep. I think that's going to be another part of his role that he can go out there and really provide to this team. And they're going to be creative as far as finding different ways and finding different matchups to make him be set up for as much success as he possibly can be.
So what's the best thing Dalton Rushing does? Best tool.
Best tool. I mean, that's
his hit tool. It's easy. I mean, I know he's competitive and all that. All that's wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
Hell, there's a lot of people that are very competitive people, that are great people, great teammates that absolutely suck at baseball. Okay. There's a lot of people in that category. So the best tool that Dalton Rushing has is his hit tool. So whenever you talk about him coming off the bench and pinch hitting, they're asking him to perform the best thing that he does.
Yes.
Whenever he's spot catching, They're asking him to do the best thing that he does, hit. Even if he spots in left field, okay? They're not evaluating him on how he plays left field. They're going to go out there and just say, here's a glove. If they hit you a routine fly ball, catch the sumbitch. That's all you got to do. But really what you need to do, Dalton, is you need to take your 4 hacks tonight and you need to help us doing the thing that you need to do the best. Squarely Dalton Rushing, the role he's going to be put in, okay? What I really love about this, the role he's going to be put in, you talk about evaluation. He's going to be evaluated based on the best thing that he does, which is hitting. And so from a role perspective, you can't ask for anything for the Dodgers to set it up better than they have for him.
Yes, and speaking of, if you are unfamiliar of Dalton Rushing and just how good he has been on the offensive side at the plate, I'm just going to read off his numbers at the minor league level. We'll group it by year just because there's been times when he's moved up to different levels. So 2022, he came to Rancho the year that he was drafted and hit 424 in Rancho.
Yeah.
A 213 WRC plus combined with his numbers at Rancho in his 2 games at the complex, which he didn't get any hits during that appearance. 2023 in Great Lakes had a 147 WRC plus, was drawing a lot of walks, hit for a lot of power. This is something you'll notice he hits for solid power wherever he goes.
Hold on, Austin. Hold on. 2023. I want to stop you right there. I don't mean to cut in, but I need to stop you there. Can you get to the game logs of 2023?
I can go ahead and get to the game logs.
Get to the game logs. I want you to go through the exact. So Dalton Rushing started that season a little bit nicked up. And what I really like about him, I want you to go through the exact. So he gets drafted, has this awesome short season in 2022 with Rancho, starts 2023 in the Midwest League with Great Lakes. It's colder than hell. He's hurt. And then tell me about this stretch he had.
Okay, so in 2023, so this is actually, I want to talk a little bit about a stretch, and I think I might be knowing where you're going with this.
Yes.
There's a stretch that he had in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
This was after he was hurt for a little bit. I think I don't remember exactly, he got nicked up behind the plate or something. And I'm trying to find exactly when exactly that happened. There was a stretch from July 23rd to August 23rd, I believe is what it looks like. Yeah. Didn't have a single hit.
0 for 36.
0 for 30 something. And Dalton
I can remember messaging him. He's like, "This is rough, bro."
And Dalton Rushing had a 147 WRC plus. Despite that,
that's why I say that.
Yes, and he went.
You didn't even know that, did you?
What was that?
Did you know that?
Oh,
that stretch is in there?
I remember that stretch. Yeah, I remember when I remember the exact game that I think I don't remember if I was at that game
where
or
he
not.
finally got a hit.
No, it was at the game that in which initially started to ring his bell a little bit, which just shows you he was able to adapt from a stretch that was very, very rough, in which a lot of hitters struggled to get through.
He's this big shot prospect. He's the biggest thing since sliced bread, and he's donut for 36, baby. And I mean, he's having to eat that one. So I mean, he had to overcome that. So
he had to overcome
I like
that.
the fact that he had to become gritty. Yeah,
he had to become gritty, and that is not something that we see often at all from Dalton Rushing. Correct. He is not a player that goes through these extreme hot stretches and then very cold stretches. He is a player that's pretty consistent. He just happened to have during Great Lakes
he was hurt.
One stretch in which he was dealing with a whole lot of other stuff. And then the conclusion to that season, obviously, with the rest of his numbers in the regular season combined with his numbers in the postseason, ridiculous. 2024 season, 114 different games, 146 WRC plus. So we went from 147 23 to 146. This year in 31 games, 145 WRC plus.
There you go.
Remarkably consistent with being well above league average as a hitter wherever he is able to go. You add in his ability to draw walks. He's a very patient hitter at the plate who does not chase a whole lot out of the zone. He is somebody that's going to go out, draw his walks. He's going to hit for power. He's going to be productive. As you had mentioned, best tool that he has. The reason why he's so highly thought of is because he hits the ball incredibly well and makes such smart decisions at the plate, and utilizes the tool sets that he has.
He does. Let's have a little bit of fun. I think you can do this. I think you can pivot here. Can you get through Kyle Schwarber's numbers to this point in Dalton Rushing's career? I know Dalton Rushing has been compared to Kyle Schwarber. Now, I'm going to go on record. I don't know, but I'm going to go on record as this to say Kyle Schwarber was probably quite a bit better than Dalton Rushing at this point in his career, but I don't know that. But I would be, especially whenever Dalton Rushing was playing left field, it was like, hey, do we have a Kyle Schwarber on our hands? This kind of deal. So I'm just curious, how has Dalton Rushing compared to Kyle Schwarber?
It's an interesting comparison because Kyle Schwarber during his time, when you're talking about Kyle Schwarber, he rose up remarkably quickly when he was at the minor league level. He was part of 72 games in 2014 for the Chicago Cubs. He then played 75 games at the minor league level in 2015 and was part of the major league club. So I don't think it's exactly a fair necessary. Well, it's a Kyle Schwarber rose up so incredibly quickly and well-deservedly so, because Kyle Schwarber, when he was at the minor league level during 2014, his combined numbers was a 192 WRC plus and 181 in 2015. That's not to say he's necessarily Dalton Rushing is going to be significantly worse than Kyle Schwarber. I think it's not necessarily a fair expectation to say he's going to be the next one, but he certainly, with the power potential that he has, Dalton Rushing, can certainly go out there and maximize a lot of his power once he's able to get to the big league level. So we'll see what kind of player Dalton Rushing is able to come.
Yeah, that actually worked out exactly the way I wanted it to, because you actually said it exactly the way I wanted you to. So chill with the Kyle Schwarber stuff. It's not a fair comparison because Kyle Schwarber, people don't understand how good that dude was. I mean, Kyle Schwarber was, just moonshot good. So that part of it, even last year, was like, this just needs to chill, man. It's apples and oranges comparing those two. As good as Dalton Rushing is, Kyle Schwarber has been on a different planet than most young players that have come through. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that the Kyle Schwarber, Dalton Rushing thing, I'm not real big on that conversation.
Yeah, no, it is. You have to be very careful when it comes to trying to make projections onto what this player is going to be at the major league level, because players' development paths is something that it sounds cliche because people say it quite often. It's not linear at all. They're not going to get immediately from one point to what another player exactly has done. Each individual in situation is very unique and very different, which is in part why the game of baseball is so fascinating, because it's so hard to be able to predict. All we can say with Dalton Rushing is he has the tools to be able to be successful at the major league level, and you hope that he's able to utilize those, and he's put in situations where he can excel with his tools that he has and put the Dodgers in a position to win a lot of games.
Okay, so let's put a bow on this. Can we all agree that Austin Barnes has been a great Dodger? We are all super thankful for him. We all love AB. We love Barnesy. We love him from the bottom of our heart, and we cannot thank him enough. At the same time, we all agree this was the correct decision.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can simultaneously have both of those opinions, and I think both of those opinions are absolutely correct. You can love what Austin Barnes was able to do for the organization, but know that this decision was going to have to be made at some point. And I think it's ultimately the Dodgers decided to do it now, and you have to get on board with what the Dodgers did.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot because I like doing that because you can take it. You got big shoulders, right?
Oh,
Plus, you're confident enough to go, you know what, screw you, I'm not answering that question. Okay, so who's the next Dodgers manager, Austin Barnes or JT, Justin Turner?
Ooh, I don't know. They got a Hall of Fame manager right now that is part.
He's not going to do it forever, though.
Well, he's not going to do it forever, but he's still got he's got more fingers that he can put rings on.
Hey, those fish start calling her name, brother. When you get to be my age, those fish start calling her name, brother. Those camping trips, they start calling her name, man.
I don't know. Championship gold is once you get more of a taste of that, and especially when you have as good of a team as the Dodgers have, you want to ride this as long as you possibly, or at least for a long while you possibly can.
So you're not going to answer the question?
No, I'm not going to answer the question.
I told you that's how you would do that. So you were hoping that I would just forget that I asked the question to begin with?
No, I'm redirecting it to saying why are we wanting Dave Roberts to be out?
Because
as a
I just wanted
manager?
to ask a fun question to see if you would give a fun answer, and just like you always do, you went statistician on my ass.
Yeah,
well, why in the world would somebody want to do something other than win 10 championships, right?
Yeah, that's the reason why you get into this. And you've got, 9 more years of Shohei Ohtani? Can you imagine Dave Roberts with, 11 different rings? That would be amazing for him.
Hey, let me give you some mentoring here, right? We talk about how Austin Barnes mentored all these people. Let me mentor you on how to answer that question. You know how I would have answered that? I guarantee you I'll take either one of them. Give me either one of them, I'm good with it. That's how you answer that question, right?
Yep.
Okay, any final thoughts, man? Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, it is I think both you and I have an immense amount of respect for Austin Barnes.
I'm just glad I didn't get emotional. I was hoping I didn't.
Yeah, and we do, and it is for good reason. With what he has done and what he has meant to this organization, you can't really put words to it. Yes, there has been a lot of frustration for Dodgers fans by his offensive production, but that's not necessarily the exact reason why he was there. His leadership, his ability to be able to make an impact in this organization, to help the young pitchers, to be a clubhouse presence, to be able to go out there and help with the pitchers, work well defensively for the most part, has meant so much to this organization that this decision did not come lightly from the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it is a sad day knowing Austin Barnes and what he has done to this organization. That being said, with these with this comes a new opportunity. And with Austin Barnes, part of having Austin Barnes on the roster because it provided a little bit of an opportunity cost against Dalton Rushing. Well, that is no longer the case because the Dodgers could not wait any longer in their minds to call up Dalton Rushing. And the reasons behind that are very clear because of how incredibly talented he is. And this presents the Dodgers with an opportunity to have two of the better catchers in the game of baseball. Dalton Rushing obviously needs a lot more experience, but could potentially grow into being a really extraordinary catcher. He presents you with an option to be able to grow another player within this system, a system which, by the way, I think very much gets underrated as far as their ability to be able to develop hitters. You look at the minor league system right now with the Dodgers hitters, they are hitting phenomenally. I tweeted out about it yesterday. Just the number of hitters that are at least 10% better than league average. The Dodgers are topping everybody in that category right now. And one of the hitters that is perhaps the best hitter within this organization that they've developed is Dalton Rushing. And I'm glad that they are moving in a direction to where not only are they getting younger, not only they're looking for ways to be able to grow prospects within in the system, but they're also looking for ways to go out and have this be a more merit-based system to try to build the best team that they possibly can. And I think Dalton Rushing makes this team better right now in 2025 and for years is going to make this Los Angeles Dodgers team as good as they can be behind the plate. A catching pairing of Will Smith and Dalton Rushing is unbelievable. And I think Dodgers fans are and should be beyond excited to see the talent, to see the character, and to see the player that is Dalton Rushing.
Totally agree. And then also, this doesn't mean that the Dodgers are going to cut Chris Taylor, who's making $13 million or whatever it is. Doesn't mean they're going to cut Miguel Rojas, however much he's making. Miguel Rojas he has no errors at shortstop and is hitting like 256. So he's actually kind of earning his keep at this point. And he had a really good year 2 years ago. Doesn't mean that those guys are next on the chopping block, but you know what this does mean? Hey, guys, if we'll cut Austin Barnes, you better get yours together because we'll cut you too because we're trying to win a world championship. Not that we want to, but if we have to, we will. That's what this statement makes. Not that they want to, but they will if they have to. They made that statement today, and because of that, I've never been more proud of this organization. And I wanted to leave you with a little bit of fun here from Al of Minerva, the best team outside of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Who would you say it is, Austin?
This is a good question.
You're going to get it wrong, but give me a guess.
As far as Major League Baseball is concerned,
just give me the best team outside of Los Angeles.
Just team as far as outside of the Dodgers. Well, I would assume it's another Major League club, but what is the answer?
The answer, according to Al of Minerva, is the Morehead City Marlins Booty Divers. And according to Al of Minerva, he or she, whoever it is, ordered their Booty Divers shirt and jersey today. The Booty Divers, according to Al of Minerva, is the best team outside of L.A. And we have one last question here from Justin Lamas. Hey, by the way, Justin, way to bring your A game today, man. You have been absolutely on fire. Make sure we're kind of inconsistent with our live shows during the season because this is like a hobby and we have all sorts of other real job stuff to do. And then we like to go to the games too. So it gets hard. So whenever you have a chance, all of you guys, come back on. Justin, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. Al Manura, Johnny, all you people, wonderful people that showed up today. But one last thing here, any small chance this is to showcase Dalton Rushing for a trade scenario? Of course, anything's possible, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, anything is possible. The difficulty with this is you don't have an Austin Barnes to go back to in this scenario. The Dodgers are decided to designate Austin Barnes for assignment. If it was one of those things where they wanted something just in case, perhaps they would have tried to find some sort of way to be able to mix Austin Barnes, Dalton Rushing, Will Smith, or find some sort of injury or something, or sometimes to be able to get some rest. It becomes a lot more difficult when you have this as your scenario, and when you and it's not something where the Dodgers would only have two catchers on their 40-man roster too. I think it's something where they have to at least have three different catchers on their 40-man roster. So if he were to be part of any type of trade, which I don't think is likely at this point, and I think they are actually excited about having Dalton Rushing 100%. Be part of this mix, I think it would be something where they would have to get some sort of catching depth at the very least to be able to be part of this mix. But that isn't my expectation right now. They refused to trade Dalton Rushing for a Garrett Crochet last year when they were dealing with some pitching injuries because they knew how talented Dalton Rushing is. And I think they are excited to be able to unleash the talent that is Dalton Rushing. And now they don't have Austin Barnes as a backup plan. He's designated for assignment right now. They're all in about giving Dalton Rushing a chance.
Okay, dadgummit. I'm doing what I always do. All right, one last question. About 7 questions later, we're still having a conversation about this stuff, right? That's how this goes. But Justin made another great point about this. The one complication we talked about all offseason was that the Dodgers, they have to have at least 13 players on their 40-man roster that had options to go up and down with. The catcher spot wasn't one of them because so what they did by removing Austin Barnes and adding Dalton Rushing instead, they added another position on their roster that's an up-down position now. So both of your backup catchers, whether it be Dalton Rushing or Hunter Fiducia, both have minor league options. Yep. So now your backup catcher spot, instead of being an Austin Barnes that's just stuck sitting on the end of the bench and everybody bitching about it, now your backup catcher spot is an up-down spot. How brilliant is that?
It is something where it turns out that having players, despite them not necessarily having the veteran type of experience and perhaps not as long of a track record, there is benefits to having players on your roster that are a little bit younger, and having guys that can move up and down can be something that is incredibly impactful, incredibly useful.
Especially for backup spots.
Just for a backup spot. that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to take advantage of it necessarily.
Correct.
I don't anticipate at the very Dalton Rushing, at least initially, to be sent back up and down, in part because I don't think they want to use one of his minor league options, although it's less of a concern when the player has 3 options as opposed to 1 option like a player like an Andy Pages does. But it's adding another player of which it's more of a merit-based system. If you have veteran players that are signed to bigger deals, you're going to give a little bit more of a runtime because you have no other choice to be able to give them more runtime. But if you have players that can move up and down with the system, that provides you with more flexibility to, if somebody is really struggling, potentially move an up down and get somebody else a chance if they have earned it based off of the merit system. I think it's a very good thing to be able to have these type of players. Not only does it add youth and more of the upward trajectory of their careers, but it also provides other stuff like this that is so incredibly important to an organization, and something that they take advantage of. Something that on the pitching side, one of the reasons why players like JP Fireeyes and Ryan Loudis were brought in is because they have minor league options and they can move up, down. And so having that a little bit on the offensive side too, I think is of value.
Yeah. Yeah. Cole says the bench isn't where they need the option spot. It's the pitching where the up downs are needed. But I'll push back on that because to me, backup spots, there's no reason not to make that an up down. What is the advantage you have of not making a backup spot an up down?
It becomes the type of player in which you actually want in those situations. And correct. I think Casey and I, part of the things that we want for the Dodgers going forward, especially with some of more of the bench type of guys, or perhaps incorporating them a little bit into a little bit more of a mix, is to get a little bit more of those guys that can move up and down, that are a little bit younger, to be able to help adapt them to the big league level and provide a little bit of hunger and youth to this lineup. Dalton Rushing certainly adds that, and he adds the ability 100%. To be able to go up down.
So we've gotten to see Hae-Sung Kim, Dalton Rushing. We've got to see, hey, does coaching in the MLB add to your time to accumulate an MLB pension? It does not. It is service time. Service time has to do with on the field playing time. What service time is the amount of days that you spend on a 26-man roster, which is the active roster. And it has to be like 100 and Austin, like 180 days a year or something to add up to one. Something like that.
There's that many days within the year that it adds. Yeah. So it would take Austin Barnes a significant amount of another year and a half to be able to reach his 10 years, which when we were talking a little bit about Chris Taylor and thinking that, and I still am under that assumption. This puts a little bit of pause into some of that, but I think with how close Chris Taylor actually is, perhaps that is still the direction of which they're going to try to go at some point. Yeah. But with Austin Barnes, having him with Dalton Rushing be on this roster for another year and a half became very, very, very complicated for the Dodgers to be able to make that work. And it ultimately, it is not something. So what, are you going to keep
Dalton Rushing in Oklahoma City for another year and a half? I mean, which is what you would have to have done.
It was either that or you have 3 catchers on your major league roster, which is not going to be something that the Dodgers were going to do.
So address the situation sooner rather than later, which is what they did.
Yes, that's exactly what they did. And they
100%.
Yep.
And I think we all agree we love AB, but it was the best decision for the Dodgers. So, hey, Austin, awesome job as always. It's always great to talk to you. I hate it that during the season we're both so busy that we don't get to climb onto these things as much as we do in the off season. But this has been a lot of fun, man.
Dude, it has been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see with the way that this team's going to go. Going to be at some Great Lakes games coming up pretty soon, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, awesome. So for Austin Brubaker, I'm Casey Porter. I want to thank all of you Dodgers dogs for tuning in. As always, you are the best. It's not the biggest crowd out there. 100% on every social media platform, including right here on YouTube. It is the best, 100%, no doubt about that. So again, for Austin Brubaker, I'm Casey Porter, and as always, it's a great day to be a Dodger.